Hello and welcome to the Vlogging Pod. Tonight we are joined by sci-fi fiction fantasy author Ryan Southwick. And I should mention adventure on that as well. Yay! Welcome Ryan to the room.
Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. So I want to start right off tonight by discussing how a 3D game developer and former radiation therapist turned those knowledges into the Z-Tech Chronicles.
Sure. Um, I have always loved programming and science fiction. I cut my teeth on the Dragonlance Chronicles, and just really have always loved science fiction. And I was a developer for about 20 years before I decided to start dabbling in writing. And when I did, I was really surprised actually at how much similarity there was between programming and writing. They're both very creative processes. You're trying to take like complex plots and figure out how they fit. With code, you have complex code, and there's a process called refactoring. Like if something changes, you need to know how to change the different parts of the application without actually breaking anything. And I was shocked when I was going through my first edits, and of course, like a lot of authors, made quite a few plot mistakes and had to change character personalities, especially on your first book. The similarities between having to go back through a novel and change certain things to make sure that you haven't broken anything else, while making sure that basically everything works. And just combined with I've not just a 3D gamer, but I was a role player for many years, and I always through the role playing experience, I really enjoyed running games, and I think the reason why I enjoyed that so much was because I enjoyed the storytelling aspect of it. And when I finally did get the courage to start writing, I instantly just fell in love with it because it was like I was just able to just tell a story, um, and it just started flowing.
Nice. So when you say role playing, are we talking like similar to Dungeon and Dragons kind of?
Oh yeah, Dungeons and
Okay.
Dragons. Yeah. Palladium was we actually we played a lot of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was a role playing game that we really enjoyed. Hmm.
Nice. I've never heard of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle role model. I've heard of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but not the role model game. So that is interesting.
Yeah,
um,
it's old. I'm probably dating myself.
well, I'm probably right up there with you. So, but let's not talk about that. So, tell me about your desire to create heroic characters that could become plausible vampires, making in the Angels in the Mist something I read that you were most most trying to do it so that way non-vampire no, excuse me, tongue-tied, non-vampire fans would be interested in it. Tell me how you have accomplished that.
Uh, in a couple of ways, I've always it could have been some of the books that I read when I was younger. I noticed that there was this huge focus when you were reading fantasy or heroic, superhero books. Sometimes it was all about the powers, or all about the science fiction, or all about the technology, and they kind of skipped over the human aspect. Right? It's like, okay, great, they've got these powers and they can do these things, but who are they? What do they do when they get home at night? Um, you know, what is their life like? Or more importantly, what is their regular life like when they have these abilities or these afflictions, or whatever it is? What is normal life like for these people. And so what I did with specifically with the Z-Tech Chronicles, which was the first series that I wrote, I did that by starting off slowly. So the series in a lot of ways starts out like any other book series. There's a protagonist, Anne Perrin. She has some issues of her own. She suffers from PTSD. She's really just trying to get by day to day. And then gradually, as you start finding out a little bit more about her life, there's a few things that happen that kind of change the direction of her life. And then suddenly you're on the story, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait a minute, there's kind of a supernatural or heroic aspect to this. And so the story and the entire series really just kind of warms you into that. And the next book does more of that and more of that and more of that. It's an epic series, but it keeps building, but slowly. So my hope was that by the time you discover there's something that's by the time you get to like the supernatural or the science fiction aspect, you're so hooked on the character and their life that it feels like this natural transition. And so that's what I set out to do with the series.
Okay. So would you say in Angels in the Mist you made your audience relate and feel for the vampires? Would you say that?
Not so much for the vampires, but the
Okay.
people who were turned into vampires.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
because they're people in a
Right.
lot of ways. They're not just monsters. They have backgrounds. They have families. They have struggles, just like everyone else.
Okay. I can understand that.
Hmm. Hmm.
So there'd have to be a tremendous amount of emotion. Did you find that draining in a sense when you were doing that?
I can't. Draining isn't the word. In fact, I think that's the reason why I write. I'm most energized when I'm writing about the emotional chapters, and there are definitely a lot of emotions both in Angels in the Mist and in Holton Dome, and I find that's when the words actually flow the most when I'm engaged, and I think that's also the feedback that I get from readers. When they're most engaged as well.
Okay. So, how do you find yourself portraying in your books the evolution of characters? Meaning, how do you develop the growth of your characters while staying true to your storyline?
Growth of the characters while staying true. Uh, so first, I think the first trick is not being too married to the storyline.
Okay.
I think the best stories are ones that are told relatively organically. So the way that I write is I come up with a general idea, kind of the settings, the characters, or at least how the characters start off, and a series of events that will likely happen throughout the series, and then I start writing it. And oftentimes, what I find out is I'll get halfway through and find out that I was wrong. The way that I thought the book was going is not at all the way the book is actually going, but I don't fight it. I like to see how those characters evolve, and when I'm writing, I'm always trying to do it with all of the different perspectives in mind. And the characters in the story oftentimes goes in a way that I never imagined, and it often ends up being much better. And what I find is that from my standpoint anyway, it comes not only do the characters stay true because I'm not bending the characters to match the characters are shaping the story as I write.
Okay. Actually, I was just going to say that when you were getting there. I was going to say, so pretty much you let your characters evolve and kind of sculpt the story a little bit more around them as the character comes more to life on the page, correct?
Absolutely, and
Okay.
then of course, when I mentioned the events, so there can be this natural evolution of the characters, but then something happens, and the fun part for me as the author is seeing how the characters react to that,
Right.
and how that shapes the story.
Okay, so let's discuss realism. When
Hmm.
I like to do research. I'm pretty sure you already know that, but I like to do research on whoever my guest is. And if I can't find an internet presence, I always have a questionnaire, something to pull from, and then I base questions off of your answers. In your case, it would be your interviews to other websites and etc. So one thing I found interesting was talking about realism. So were you writing fantasy? It comes with a
Hmm.
large amount of creativity, yes?
Yes.
Okay, so although your work seems to balance heavily on realism, tell us how you
Hmm.
find that balance. Because, I mean, you are talking about fantasy, and fantasy, that can just go the realm of a lot of options. So tell me how you find your balance.
Yeah. I always when there's something fantastical about to happen in one of my books, or there are things that either look like powers or look like super science or whatever it is. I always try to take a step back and imagine in my head, okay, is there a plausible road to this place? So meaning if this one or two things were true, could this actually happen? And because there are a lot of things, as we move forward, as the human race, we're discovering things all the time that we thought, things we thought were impossible even 20 years ago, turn out to be actually active, to be fact. And so sometimes it just takes a couple of base tweaks on that. Say, okay, well, here's where things are going. What if we took that just a step further? So still to be on the realm of the possible, what could that turn into? And then once that's established, is making sure that as I'm moving forward, that once I have that, let's call it a semi-realistic base, because it's science fiction and fantasy,
Mm-hmm.
um, is being true to those rules, right? So once I have that, no matter how much I might want something to happen in the book because it might be convenient for the plot or convenient for the scene, I always take a step back and say, okay, well, quote unquote, realistically, uh, if these things were true and all these things that I've established in the book, what realistically could happen or could these characters do? And try to be true to myself and to the readers to not stray too far from that. And I think that is really what helps ground realism around the fantasy and science fiction. The other thing is also making sure that everything around that is realistic. The characters, even they might have, these powers or this whatever, but they're still human. And are the responses to those powers and to these situations relatable to, to an average person?
Okay. Um, I was actually thinking that in my head, relatable, and then you said the word. I must be. I have power. So, so let's touch base on your newest creation. It's not quite released yet.
Mhm.
I am looking at it on your website. So let's talk a little bit about, and I hope I pronounce this right. Is it Holton Dome? Holton?
Holton Dome,
Holton Dome.
exactly.
Okay.
Hmm.
Tell us about how this began. And also, I would
Oh,
love to know if it's going to be a series.
yeah, okay.
Okay.
So Holton Dome began. Uh, so even though my current series, this Z-Tech Chronicles, isn't, all of the books haven't been published, the series is finished.
Okay.
And when I got to the end of the series, and it's basically just in line waiting for edits and for the publisher. So which it was a great accomplishment. And when it got to the end, I'm like, okay, what am I going to do next? And I had this idea, um, really around kind of I I'm trying to figure out how to say this without any spoilers, but let's just say I had an idea, and as I was exploring it, about these two characters who are kind of made for each other, I guess you could say, and the things that they get into, and the differences between them, this enormous gulf that seems almost insurmountable, but there's something about these two characters that that draws them to each other. And as I started fleshing it out in my head, it just started to become this dystopian landscape. And um, and so I decided where with the Z-Tech Chronicles, I really they were a lot of the characters were characters that I had been bouncing around in my head for years. These were brand new characters to me. The world concept was brand new to me. So Holton Dome takes place 500 years in the future. It's a little bit post-apocalypse, but a little bit past post-apocalypse, where humanity is starting the long road to recovery. The Earth has become hostile to its native inhabitants. So there are these deadly lightning storms and deadly acid storms that require all the what remains of humanity to seek shelter under special domes that are designed to resist what the Earth has become. And but it all revolved around these two characters, and so I just I didn't have much of a plot in mind, which is was sort of a different approach for me when I started writing Halton Dome. And what I found was, as normally happens, I got about halfway through and then I had to start plotting it. But
Sounds familiar. Keep going.
yeah, yeah. Which really helped. But yeah, so Holton Dome is it is I call it a dystopian science fiction because although it is in kind of this dystopian time period, there is a science fiction kind of like super science aspect to it. So it starts off very much like any other dystopian that you would imagine. But again, no spoilers. Things start happening that indicate that there might be more going on in the world or with some of the characters than was originally thought. And so the plot really starts going from there. But it centers around a world. What I tried to imagine as I was moving forward. So I've spent some time in Armenia, a country that used to be part of the Soviet bloc, and I have learned more than I ever thought I would about what what those sorts of countries went through being under communist rule, and how the communists, or the Soviets, I should say specifically, maintained control over the countries that were part of the Soviet Union, and the things that happened to them when the Soviet Union collapsed. And so the world that Holton Dome is in, or the Earth, I should say, that Holton Dome is kind of like a reimagination of that. Like, what would happen if the Soviet Union went, let's call it, to the next level? What would life look like? What would the government look like? How, what would the next level of control look like that the government would incur? And so the story takes place with the protagonist. His name is Seg, is a farmer who is just almost like the equivalent of like a serf in the Middle Ages, and so it's a lot about the haves, the have-nots, and how people in power. It's kind of like just an exploration of how people in power could maintain control over the world, and what is life like for the people who are actually on the ground. Yeah.
Okay. That's a lot. So basically, this stems off from the Z-Tech Chronicles. Am I hearing you right on that?
No, this is a completely different series.
Okay.
Totally different world, totally different characters. This is completely.
You just had a thought.
No vampires.
You just had a thought from that prior, correct?
Yeah, and this was my follow-on when I finished writing the Z-Tech Chronicles.
Okay.
I wanted to move on to something new,
Oh, okay.
and so this was my chance at trying something new, different genre, different characters, and really kind of starting over.
Okay. But you said you had an idea after doing it, so I just misconstrued you. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's my apologies. That's all right. So now I understand when we signed you up, your cover was a little bit different. and you've since changed it, and it's quite appealing. I'm looking at it on your website. So tell me how the cover came about.
The new cover?
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Yeah. So the new cover, when I so again, my first series, I think I was still trying to figure out the Z-Tech Chronicles is a mix of, I want to call it a mix of a couple of different genres, both urban fantasy as well as science fiction. And when I first started writing it, and I was, or more appropriately, when I first tried to publish it, I think I was still kind of learning the difference between the genres and, okay, is it more this or more that? And so with the first cover attempt, it was more urban fantasy focused, trying to look more modern without looking really science fictiony. But as we started moving forward, and as the series itself evolved, and as we started getting feedback from readers, it really seems to fall more on the science fiction side, because there's also, in addition to vampires, there's also a lot of tech, big tech focus with, robots and androids and things like that. So we decided to take the cover theme in a different approach and make it more tech and science fiction focused. I think what we ended up with, I liken it to I grew up with Tron. I loved that movie when I was a kid, and it reminds me a little bit of that, which I think really drew me to it.
Right. I've seen Tron myself. So again, we're dating ourselves. I don't know if you heard it, but my buzzer went off. Usually we do a 20-minute podcast, but no worries.
Okay.
I want to ask you one final question, okay? So if we go over, it's okay. So for my final question of the evening, I would love to know more about your scene card premise that you use in your work. So tell me a little bit about that.
My scene card premise?
Yes, I read in an interview that you did that.
Mm-hmm. Scene card premise. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what that means, so to be honest. You might be talking about, you might just be talking about or it might have been referencing just like the story cards.
Okay, all right.
When I write with Scrivener, and so I tend to, probably like a lot of writers, I'll write out the index cards just with a sentence or two, and I don't go overboard. I'll write, maybe 10 or something like that to very loosely very, very loosely outline the plot, right. And then I'll use those to build the story as I go. And I love that, especially in Scrivener, because you can just rearrange them any way that you want, take them out, put new ones in. It makes it nice and easy.
Okay, so this is basically a computer application that you can use, right?
Yes,
awesome.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah. In my opinion, probably the best. I evaluated a lot of different writing tools out there, and Scrivener absolutely came out the top. I'm not sure I could write without it these days. Highly recommended for anybody who's looking to get into it, and not very expensive.
Well, nice. I'd like to thank you so much, Ryan, for being with us tonight, and to my listeners. It's your continuing listening, my audience, that makes our journey on this podcast so enjoyable. So please know that all talent is welcome on our podcast. Currently, we are booked up until November. But if you'd like to be on our podcast, please know that you can go to sheshedstudios.net to be among our guests. And once again, I want to thank you so much again, Ryan, for being here. It's been a true pleasure. And go ahead.
I was going to say thank you, Eri, for having me, and thank you, everybody, for listening.
Oh, we'll have to have you on again when the book comes out and you get your foot and going on it, because I'd love to know if it's going to be more into the series of it. Yes?
Yeah, it is, and I'm sorry, you asked that question. It is going to be probably a 3-book series.
Nice. Good. So thank you again, once again. For now, everyone, bye-bye, and we'll see you next Thursday. So stay tuned. Bye-bye for now.